In the middle of the 20th century, British agricultural researchers recorded numbers that made no sense according to modern farming logic. Repeated harvests from the same land year after year, with yields exceeding 100 tons per acre on soil that could barely grow grass, a plant that could be cut back completely and return to full height in less than a month, a crop that needed no fertilizer, no irrigation, and no replanting for decades, while laboratory tests confirmed something even more unsettling. When its leaves were returned to the soil, they decomposed in less than 2 days, releasing nutrients faster than any known green manure. At a time when most crops took weeks to break down, this one seemed to melt into the ground, quietly restoring fertility without machinery, chemicals, or fuel. Long before modern labs confirmed it, Victorian farmers already understood its value, growing it as a safeguard against crop failure and famine. Yet by the turn of the 21st century, this same plant had nearly vanished from American garden centers, not because it failed, but because it worked too well. While global agriculture shifted toward purchased inputs, synthetic fertilizers, and fossil fuel dependence, this plant stood apart by offering something dangerous to large systems: independence. It produced potassium levels far beyond animal manure, regenerated soil faster than compost, and delivered fertility continuously for 20 years from a single planting, all without tying the farmer to annual purchases, contracts, or supply chains. Today, the fertilizer industry generates hundreds of billions of dollars each year by selling nutrients that must be bought again and again, requiring massive energy inputs and natural gas consumption. Yet this plant offered the same nutrients for free, grown once and harvested repeatedly. And that contradiction alone explains why its story is not taught in agricultural textbooks, why it is rarely mentioned by extension offices, and why most gardeners over 50 remember hearing the name once and then never again. This is not a story about a miracle cure or a forgotten folk remedy. It is a story about a biological system that disrupted economics long before it challenged science. A plant that did exactly what nature intended and was quietly pushed aside because it could not be controlled, patented, or monetized. Its name is comfrey, and understanding why it disappeared requires looking far beyond gardening and deep into the way modern agriculture learned to replace living systems with products sold in bags, bottles, and contracts. The earliest written record of comfrey appears nearly 2,000 years ago, when Greek physicians described a plant whose roots seemed to encourage tissue to rejoin and repair. Its name derived from a word meaning to bind together. Roman naturalists later demonstrated its adhesive properties, boiling the roots into pastes that physically bonded materials. For centuries, it earned the nickname knitbone across Europe. But its true agricultural value remained hidden until the 19th century, when a poor Quaker named Henry Doubleday witnessed one of history's greatest human failures, the Irish potato famine, a catastrophe that killed over 1 million people, while fertile land stood idle and single-crop dependence proved fatal. Haunted by what he saw, Doubleday spent years searching for alternatives, initially attempting to manufacture glue and starch, both ventures failing, until he encountered comfrey not as medicine, but as a source of biomass. When he requested a Russian variety for experimentation, fate intervened. The plants he received were not pure. They were hybrids, exhibiting a vigor neither parent possessed. The results were unprecedented, yields that defied accepted limits, harvests repeated multiple times per season, and soil improvement without depletion. Doubleday abandoned his commercial pursuits and devoted the remainder of his life to studying this plant, believing it could prevent future famine. He meticulously recorded yields, cultivation methods, and nutritional data for 3 decades, living modestly and dying without recognition. And in a tragic twist, his family burned all his notes after his death, erasing the most comprehensive body of research ever compiled on comfrey. As industrialization accelerated, agriculture turned toward mechanization and chemical solutions. Perennial plants lost favor, and the memory of a man who produced massive yields using nothing but hand tools faded into obscurity. Yet the plant itself remained, quietly growing, waiting for someone to rediscover what had already been proven. That rediscovery came in the late 1940s when horticulturist Lawrence Hills uncovered Doubleday's forgotten work and decided to verify every claim, founding a research association dedicated solely to comfrey. Hills collected strains from across Britain and planted them side by side, measuring growth rates, nutrient content, disease resistance, and yield over many seasons. Where Doubleday's records had been lost, Hills rebuilt the evidence, and one strain rose above all others, Bocking 14, a sterile variety incapable of invasive seeding, rich in potassium, resistant to disease, and unmatched in productivity. But Hills made a decision that sealed comfrey's fate. He refused to patent it, instead distributing root cuttings freely to anyone who asked. Gardeners, farmers, researchers across 6 continents received living fertility without cost. And laboratory analysis soon revealed why this plant was so disruptive. Its leaves contained potassium concentrations several times higher than traditional manure. And unlike other green manures that lingered in compost heaps, comfrey broke down in under 48 hours, triggering rapid microbial activity and immediate nutrient availability. Its secret lay underground, with roots penetrating 10 feet deep, mining minerals unreachable by shallow-rooted crops and concentrating them in harvestable leaves. Every cutting brought nutrients from deep soil layers back to the surface, making comfrey a biological nutrient pump rather than a consumer of fertility. This challenged the very foundation of synthetic fertilizer economics, because comfrey required no repeat purchases, no fuel inputs, and no processing plants. It simply grew. And as Hills retired, Bocking 14 had spread worldwide, quietly undermining the idea that fertility had to be manufactured. By the early 20th century, natural fertilizer sources were running out, and scientists feared global famine. The invention of synthetic ammonia production saved millions of lives, but permanently tied agriculture to fossil fuels. Today, that process feeds half the world while consuming enormous quantities of natural gas, creating a system where farmers must purchase nutrients every season to remain productive. Comfrey represented a threat, not because it replaced nitrogen, but because it eliminated dependence. Once established, it produced for decades, survived extreme cold, resisted drought, required no pesticides, and regenerated after repeated harvests. If widely adopted, it would have reduced demand for commercial potassium and soil conditioners. And then, in 2001, a regulatory event changed everything. Health authorities warned against ingesting comfrey supplements due to compounds in the roots that could damage the liver when consumed internally over long periods. The warning was accurate but limited. It applied only to dietary supplements, not agricultural use, but the distinction was lost in headlines. Garden centers pulled comfrey entirely, nurseries stopped carrying it, and within a few years, it disappeared from mainstream gardening. No explanation clarified that composting comfrey posed no risk. No education followed, and the timing coincided with rising natural gas prices and consolidation within the fertilizer industry. The result was not a ban on growing comfrey, but a cultural erasure, a plant removed from shelves in memory without being disproven, outlawed, or defeated. Despite everything, comfrey remains unchanged. Bocking 14 still produces extraordinary biomass, still regenerates rapidly, still delivers mineral-rich leaves, and still requires no external inputs. It thrives on marginal land, survives harsh winters, and stays exactly where planted. 5 harvests per year, 20 tons per cut for decades. A system that solves fertility without dependence. Those who grow it today understand that soil health does not come from bags, but from biology. Comfrey persists underground and in private gardens, passed quietly between growers, decentralized and unpatentable, exactly as Lawrence Hills intended. It cannot be monopolized, genetically locked, or forced into annual purchasing cycles, and that is precisely why it matters. This is not nostalgia. It is math, a system that produces value continuously without extraction or replacement. Comfrey is not extinct. It is waiting. And when dependence becomes too expensive, when supply chains fail, and when fertilizer costs rise beyond reach, the plant that was pushed aside will still be there, deep-rooted, resilient, and ready. The only question is whether people will remember how to grow fertility instead of buying it.